When it comes to the seeing Scrum and Agile practices as just bureaucracy that gets in the way, for me as a change agent, a coach, that is always an indication that somewhere, somehow, maybe we've lost track of why did we bring in this process? Because I see any sort of process stuff needs to be there to support the productivity. Right. And, sometimes people fall in love with the process itself and suddenly it's about doing the process right. It's like, well, process is only useful if it helps us actually produce the results we're trying to get. One common anti-pattern I see is organizations that will implement Scrum on top of what they're already doing.
Today's guest is someone who has spent nearly 2 decades at the intersection of human happiness and the organizational productivity. Chris Seams is a certified Scrum trainer, a co-author of 2 books in the field, a fixture in the software engineering world since the mid-90s, transitioning from programmer to a director-level leader, and eventually world-class coach. Today, we are going to peel back the layers of unique journey to the boardroom and find out why it believes brevity is the key to mastering the Scrum. Hello and welcome to PMP with Prachi, the podcast dedicated to helping you master your project management and transition from a manager to a project leader. Today's guest is someone who has spent nearly 2 decades at the intersection of human happiness and the organizational productivity. Chris Seams is a certified Scrum trainer and the founder of Agile Learning Labs. Chris is also a co-author of 2 books in the field, The Elements of Scrum and The Incredible Popular Scrum. Chris has been a fixture in the software engineering world since the mid-90s, transitioning from an operator and programmer to a director-level leader, and eventually world-class coach. Today, we are going to peel back the layers of unique journey from the mechanical shop to the boardroom and find out why he believes brevity is the key to mastering the Scrum. Chris, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Hey, I'm excited to be here and I'm impressed you really dug into the depths of my work history there. I love it.
Absolutely. But why don't we start by asking you to share your journey from software engineering to becoming a coach and starting Agile Learning Labs?
Oh, goodness. Can I start just a little earlier than that?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So my career journey looks kind of like this. Worked at Burger King, made a lot of Whoppers. I was a vegetarian at the time. And so something about expressing my personal values through the work that I did just had not occurred to me yet, right? I didn't even think of how these two parts of my life, might actually be related and come together. Next, I became an auto mechanic, which was a little bit better fit, right? I was and still am a little bit of a car enthusiast. And then I became a professional musician. And I did that through most of my 20s. And it was a lot of fun. But at some point, it became clear I was never going to be a rock star. And in fact, if I kept doing that as my full-time job, that I was going to starve, right? And so I had this aha moment, right, where I realized, there is something missing in my life. Regular income. And so I went to college to turn my hobby, which was writing computer programs, into something I could do for a living. So I came out of University of Illinois, moved to Silicon Valley, and I had a pretty typical software developer career, right? It was like developer becomes manager, becomes director kind of a thing. And it was while I was at a financial software company that in about late 1999, early 2000, that I first encountered the stuff that we now generally refer to as like Agile, Scrum. Now, we didn't have the Agile word yet because the snowbird gathering that happened in Utah in 2001. It hadn't happened yet, right? But I encountered extreme programming. And like I was, there was a bunch of us talking about it on Usenet news groups back in the day. And I was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. And so I brought it to the team that was assembling around a new product at the company I worked at. And I said, hey, I think this would really work for us. And the reaction was, okay, fine, but you got to do all that process stuff. And so I essentially became the scrum master for that team. And it was honestly a life changing experience. Um, the same group of people had previously been on a project where a lot of great work happened, but no product ever shipped. And this time, right, using kind of this agile approach, we came together, built a really amazing and ultimately very successful product. In fact, it's still part of that company's, kind of cornerstone of their offering. We built it with really good predictability. We built it with high quality, both internal quality, like code quality, and external quality, right? The user experience of using the product. And um, it, it changed everybody's lives who was on that team, right? We really became a high performing team. And that group of people went on to like scatter to different companies and then come back together and then scatter to different companies and come back together. And they worked on some other really kind of great products over the years. For me, what happened was, I got promoted. I started rolling out this kind of agile way of working more widely, in my career there at that company. But ultimately, I figured out that what I really enjoyed was helping people find these better ways of working, right? Ways where people are happier, they enjoy their work better, and ultimately they create better products and more value. And so in 2007, I started Agile Learning Labs. And these days, I spend my time working with companies that are adopting agile practices, most commonly around Scrum, or these days more and more companies that are evolving and fixing their less functional Scrum implementations. Right? Sadly, there's a lot of bad Scrum out there. But I still to this day very much enjoy the work and love seeing, teams and whole organizations become healthier, happier, more productive places. So that's me. Maybe a longer story than you were looking for, but that's
No,
fine.
that's interesting. I didn't know this much about you. So glad to know about that. And you mentioned in 2007, you started Agile Learning Labs. So I think that is very much, you were the first few adapters of Agile, I would say, because Agile came in place in, I would say, one. And 2007, you already had your company where you were helping the organization. So you were, I could say, early adopter.
I would classify myself as a very early adopter. I was not one of the creators, right? I did not invent any of this stuff. But I was fortunate enough to be there very early and see it and think, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And actually, then use it right away and get to see like, oh, what's working, what's not working. And yeah. So when I knew that I wanted to go out and start my own like consulting and training firm. And when I first did that, I thought, oh, I'm just going to help, engineering leaders to more generally be more effective, right? Leverage some of the stuff that I learned. And what I quickly found was that the part of my experience that everyone was excited about was the agile stuff. They're like, "You've actually done it?" I'm like, "Yeah, isn't everybody doing it?" And turns out, no, not everybody had started doing that, in 2007, and so that became the focus of my practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And since founding the Agile Learning Labs, you have become a prolific author as well, known for making Scrum accessible through the elements of Scrum and your breathtakingly belief introduction to the framework. In the world where corporate frameworks are becoming increasingly complex, why have you fought so hard to keep the core of Scrum brief and simple?
I think that the reason that Scrum became so successful in the first place is that it is very simple,
Yes.
right? And I often say it's simple doesn't mean it's easy, right?
Yes.
But I think it's a great starting point to figure out like, well, how do we need to work together here at this organization with these people and this technology and this maybe distributed way of working or however we are, because the basic framework itself just has these core feedback loops for continuously improving how we're working, continuously improving our understanding of what the product should be, right, continuously improving just even during the sprint, like day to day, what should people be working on? And I think those feedback loops are really essential for doing complex work. And there's other ways to implement them, but I think Scrum is a simple and elegant way to do it. And then, yeah, in each environment, there's going to be details that get added on and et cetera to make things work there. But in general, I've always been a fan of as little process as supports the people in doing the work, right? I'd rather err on the side of a little bit too little process than a little bit too much. That's
Mhm.
always been kind of where I've come from.
Yeah, and you mentioned that it's simple. That doesn't mean it's easy. It's easy to understand, but it's difficult to implement it and follow it rigorously through all the sprints throughout the project. So, yes, it is easy to understand, but it's difficult to implement. Even as you teach these simple foundations, you are often helping organizations tackle the very complex goal of improving both productivity and happiness. Many coaches focus strictly on the outputs. So why do you view team happiness as a non-negotiable matrix for success?
Yeah. Uh, I think for as long as it's human beings doing the work, and I think we've probably got a few more months left before the AI take over everything and then we're redundant. But for as long as it's human beings doing the work, um, the human side of the work matters a lot, right? And I think most people can look back on work environments where they were happy and the environment felt like a healthy place to be versus environments where it wasn't the case. And we tend to do our best work in the healthy environments, right? Like the super high pressure, someone's yelling at me, like that can work for a very short period of time, right? Like if you need to squeeze the last drop of productivity out this week and you don't care about the long-term consequences, then okay, I guess. But if you want to have high performance in a sustainable way, right? Where people stay in the organization and you get the benefit of the deep knowledge they have about, the history of the product and relationships with the people they work with and knowing how to work with them. Then it's really important to work in ways that are healthy and make people like want to stay there. Right. So I think happiness is not just nice. I think happiness has real business value, right? I think happier people by and large stay, they create more value, and they're intrinsically motivated to do their best work, right? Like when we're at a place where we feel like, hey, this is a good place, the people I'm working with care about me. Like our level of investment in that work and that place and those colleagues is very high, right? Where when we work at a place where we're like, oh, this place is horrible, right? I hate it here, that's not where we do our best work. So I think it matters a lot.
Yeah, and even if you see in project management, all the theories, there are Maslow's theory and Y and Z theory, all those theories mostly focus on motivation, and motivation comes from a leader who, who supports you, a team who has the psychological safety environment in the team. So that's what motivation is for your team members, and your team members are who's going to do the actual work. So you need to keep them happy in order to get things done. So yeah, absolutely. Now, with your background in lean software development, did how do you distinguish between the team that is just doing Scrum and one that is actually thinking in the lean or efficient ways of doing things?
Yeah. I think there's a lot. So I mentioned earlier, I still see a lot of bad Scrum, right? More and more of my clients are organizations that already think of themselves as using Scrum or doing Scrum, and but they're like not real happy with it. It's like, oh, it's not working for us, and so they'll bring me in, and I very often I find, well, you're not using it very well, right? And a lot of times it's they've learned certain mechanics, but they don't understand why we would do those things. And so, for example, if you have a daily stand up meeting where everybody shows up and goes, yesterday I did this, today I'll do that, I have no impediments. And then we all leave, right? We all walk away from that going, why did we do that? How did that make anything better? Right? Can I please just have that time back? Or worse yet, if we have a daily scrum that takes an hour, right, where we listen to somebody blather on and on about something that has nothing to do with what we're trying to do today, right? Yeah, even worse. And I think those sorts of problems come when people don't understand, like, well, why does Scrum have a daily scrum? Right? And so when we start to understand why, right, which is like, oh, in Scrum, we're trying to create a self organizing team that will consistently swarm around the most important work. And that the whole purpose of daily Scrum is to simply identify what's the most important work for this team, the team today, and then how is the team going to address that work. Typically, we can get in and out of that in less than 15 minutes, but also it presupposes that what we're trying to do here is optimize the output of a team versus a lot of places are think of themselves as doing Scrum, but they're really not because they're really not teams. They're really more like work groups, right? Each person has their own work and they're really not doing a lot of collaboration. They're really not trying to solve problems together in a collaborative way. And work groups are fine, right? There's certain kinds of work where that's fine. And so in that case, my advice is actually often stop doing Scrum. Stop doing the Scrum stuff because you're not trying to be a team. A team isn't even a good fit for the work you do. So don't waste everybody's time with like daily scrums and retrospectives where if all of our work is separate, then how is coming together to try to figure out how to improve gonna really work? Versus an awful lot of situations they're behaving that way, but if we really look at it, people see that actually if we were a team, like a true team, this would be a lot better, right? Because teams tend to move faster on the most important stuff. They tend to have higher quality work because, like, we can cover each other's blind spots, right? It doesn't matter, like, how much of an expert you are, you have blind spots. But if you're on a true team, your teammates are going to pick up the stuff that you miss. And so in those environments where that's what they want to get is the real value of having teams, then the work is all about understanding how to use the stuff in Scrum to get those changed behaviors so we can get the results we're really looking for. And a big part of it is what are we trying to optimize, right? People's natural inclination is to optimize like personal productivity, which usually ends up meaning I'm very busy, right? I feel productive because I'm very busy. Whereas we tend to have better outcomes if we focus at higher levels like team productivity, right? Or whole department productivity, right? That sort of thing. And in that case, it turns out some of the things, the very things that would make an individual productive, actually aren't helping and may even be hurting team level or organizational level or initiative level productivity, right? Like the programmer who's like, oh, when I'm writing new code, I feel very productive. It's like, okay, great. But if the most important thing for your team to do is to get this new feature done, and what we're blocked on is testing, then you making new code changes is actually hurting productivity because it's probably number one, it's not getting the testing done. Number two, it's probably actually making the testing harder because now it's a moving target, right? So uh, I like to help teams shift the focus from like, am I being as productive as I can to, am I contributing in the best ways so that my team will be as productive as they are? And I think, and then the next step is, well, what is productivity, right? All too often it's about getting stuff done. And it's like, okay, that's a first level. Like if we don't get stuff done, sure, we're not going to be productive. So, okay, but at the end of the day, it's beyond getting stuff done. It's creating the value. So is the stuff that we're getting done actually the most valuable stuff? And how do we know that, right? How are we closing that feedback loop with our stakeholders about what we're producing to make sure that it's actually solving their problems? And so as teams and organizations get kind of better at this, more mature with this, we kind of start to get past just, s- baseline, are we delivering stuff, and really start to focus on like, how can we maximize the value of what we deliver? So it's that kind of progression. So long answer, but hopefully useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a leader, it's our job. That's the primary job, I would say, to get team or individuals together and not uh, try um, that they don't work in silos. Rather than silos, get them together. And that's the work of a real leader, right? Instead of getting like doing their stuff, like if the engineer is not doing their code on time, then if a leader has the technical background, at times they start coding, right? So that's not their job. Their job is to get people together and get things done, and get the value out of it. So, along the same lines, if a team is currently struggling with agile fatigue or feeling like Scrum is just another layer of bureaucracy, so what is the small change you suggest they make to reclaim that productivity and happiness?
Yeah. Yeah. And I hear like two potentially different issues in that question. I'd like to speak to both of them because I see them both. Um, so when it comes to the like seeing Scrum and Agile practices as just bureaucracy that gets in the way, for me as a change agent, a coach, um, that is always an indication that somewhere, somehow, maybe we've lost track of like, why did we bring in this process? Because I see any sort of process stuff needs to be there to support the productivity, right? And, sometimes people fall in love with the process itself and suddenly it's about doing the process right. It's like, well, process is only useful if it helps us actually produce the results we're trying to get. One common anti pattern I see is organizations that will implement Scrum on top of what they're already doing. And so this is what it looks like. We've got some ways that we work around here, probably the traditional like, things are assigned to managers and then managers break them up and assign them to people and, that's how we work and there's a bunch of meetings that happen and, that's how we communicate with our stakeholders and blah blah blah, right? So we've got all this stuff we're already doing. And then some leader is like, hey, we're not fast enough. We're not adaptable enough. We need to be more agile. So we should adopt Scrum. And so they'll send people off for training and whatnot. And then they come back and they're like, okay, now we're going to have teams and the teams are going to have sprint planning and daily Scrum and sprint review or retrospective and backlog refinement. And that's all great, but they don't take away any of the stuff that was already happening. And so now people, besides trying to do the actual hands-on keyboard work or whatever the work is, now they're going to two sets of meetings, right? And we've got two systems that are kind of competing for people's attention, right? Like I'm supposed to be on a team working from a backlog that's organized by a product owner, but I've also got my manager telling me to do things, right? And then, yeah, Scrum just feels like a big pain in the butt. right? It's like, this is worse than it used to be. And in those situations, my guidance is always, if you're going to adopt Scrum, you got to find out how Scrum takes care of the stuff that you used to do in the old way, and then drop those old things that you did and incorporate that into your use of Scrum, right? Like if, we have a bunch of meetings with stakeholders, it's like, no, no, no. Scrum has this thing called sprint review. It's like the town hall meeting, right? Let's bring everybody together there. We'll have those conversations there. Things like that, right? Oh, I'm getting two sets of marching orders, product owner and manager. It's like, if you're on a team, you need to work on the stuff for the team, which means the manager has to submit requests to the product owner. But then the next level is actually doing the detective work to find out, like, well, who's assigning work to that manager? Right. And we got to get those people to like work with the system now. Cause, the manager's probably just trying to get stuff done that other people are asking them to do. So when people feel like, oh yeah, Scrum's just another layer of bureaucracy, very often that's what's happening. The other part of your question was like agile fatigue. And one of the things that I often see people lose sight of is that sustainability was always part of like the agile way of working, meaning it's important that everybody involved be able to like work at the pace they're working in sustainably and, indefinitely. And all too often what happens is we're pushing too hard. We're working in ways that are not sustainable, both human sustainable, meaning we're working too many hours and things like that, but also like technologically unsustainable, right? We're rushing, which means we're incurring technical debt, which then slows us down in the future, but then that puts more pressure on us. So we feel like we need to work even harder. So we work more hours, we create more technical debt, and it's like this downward spiral, right? And the important thing is to notice that we're doing that. And then to take a step back and say, hey, the only way out is to implement sustainable ways of working. And again, that means both human sustainable, like we're going to work reasonable hours, right? Because that's where we're most productive. Um, and we're going to take the time to learn and adopt practices and tools and techniques that help make the work sustainable, right? Like, automated testing, things like that, so that we really can go at a fast rate in a sustainable way. So, um, yeah, that's often, where the coaching ends up going when I find like, the burned out team. Uh, and that one other thing that happens with this too, part of this is often like a product owner, product manager, product side problem. And what I mean by this is uh, and I mean humans, organizations, product owners, product managers, just people, are actually remarkably bad at knowing what our stakeholders really need and really value. In fact, oftentimes our stakeholders are not very good at it. And so we end up building a lot of stuff that is ultimately very low value. And so part of the answer to making this more sustainable is actually investing in our product people and helping them learn about product discovery techniques and, like lean product development techniques so that we can like be validating our beliefs about what our stakeholders and customers want and testing those instead of just having the team build everything that a customer asks for. And so that way we can actually get way more sustainable because we can build a lot less stuff, but get good at focusing on the stuff that's high value. So that ends up being another part of the puzzle.
Yeah, being lean along with agile, like uh, less waste and produce more value.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you have spent, as you mentioned, that you are a coach and a mentor. So what is the most common aha moment you see in your students when they finally move past the theory and start practicing the Scrum mindset?
Boy, that's a hard one. because I think it varies quite a lot by whatever their situation is and whatever their particular blocks have been. Um, I've had people for whom the big aha moment was, "Oh, it's okay to change the plan," right? And that was like, earth-shattering for them. I've had other folks where the big aha moment was, um, "Oh, we're not actually doing anybody a good service when we say yes, when we actually know the real answer is no." Right? It seems that, like, the big boss comes down and says, "You have to get this thing done by Friday." Everyone goes, "Okay." Right? But the real value is to, if there's no way that's gonna happen by Friday, is to look at the big boss and say, "We're really sorry, but that's not possible." Right? Let's talk about what some of the options are and all that, but, we're not gonna tell you yes when we know that's not the answer. It's just that, boy, there's so many, right? So many places are still wrapped up in thinking like story points and velocity matters. And like sometimes the big aha is like, oh, it's actually the product and the value to the stakeholders that matter. And let's stop arguing about story points. And you know, it's just so many. It really is different for each organization, each person, each team I work with.
Hmm. And you teach so many people around the world. Um, and since almost 20 years, you are training, you are a certified trainer, Scrum trainer. So, how do you keep the materials fresh yourself so that your 500th class feels the same energy as like your first class?
Yeah. This I have to give a lot of credit to the students, right? I've been teaching this for a long, long time, right? Since 2007. And I still learn stuff pretty much every class. And I learn I have deeper insights about, oh, how to help people really see the benefit. Or sometimes I have the insights about like, oh, there's actually different ways that this stuff could work for people, right? I when I started out, I was a little bit of an evangelist. I'm like, this is the method and this is how you do it. And if you do it this way, it'll be great. Do it this way. And over the years, I've like encountered so many teams that I've worked with where I'm like, wow, you're doing this thing that I used to think was like not a good thing, but it really works for you. Right. And then my mind goes, whoa, and then that feeds back into my teaching, right? Because, um, it's not just here's the one right way, listen to me. It becomes more and more of a conversation with that group of people, and that makes it more relevant, and I think it makes it more valuable and engaging for them, and it certainly makes it more interesting for me because it's like, all right, I walk in and I've got this experience with, like, helping different types of people and organizations use this theory, and they're walking in with like, "Oh, here's our situation and here's what we're trying to do." And, they're the experts in their product technology company, whatever it is. I suppose I'm an expert in Scrum and Agile stuff. And then we get to have this like conversation and collaboration that's not a one-way thing. It's not like, "I'm here to teach you." It's more like, "Hey, let me share what I know and let's talk about like how this can help." And, for me, that keeps it interesting and engaging.
Hmm. And that's the beauty of interacting with humans. Every human is different, they have different perspective, they bring their ideas, and we learn from each other. So uh, it's not machine, it's easier to work with machine rather than humans because humans are unexpected, like they ask unexpected questions out of nowhere, but that's how you learn from each other. So yeah, talking about that, to wrap things up, I would like to ask you about Agile and AI.
Okay.
Partner predicted that by this year, over 70% of Agile teams would be using AI powered assistants daily. And we are seeing that. Um, we have seen that since last year, at least, if not before that. The 2026 State of Agile report highlights a visible paradox. Organizations have more data and visibility than ever, yet many are seeing declining software quality and slower delivery because of a lack of human alignment.
Yeah.
With your deep roots in a people centric approach of Agile Manifesto, how do you advise teams to integrate AI as a teammate without letting it erode the human empathy?
Yeah. I so I will start this by saying I am not going to claim to be an AI expert, right? Which maybe makes me an outlier these days because every consultant I've met is now suddenly an AI expert. But here's what I've seen from the teams that I've worked with and how they're using AI and what's working, what's not working. Um, Folks who are using it as a programming aid are having, well, some of them are having very good luck. But the key thing is it still has to be the human that's defining, like, what does the behavior of the code need to be? So some of the agile practices like test first development are actually becoming more important than they used to be. Um, and folks who are getting good with that, with really thinking about like, oh, what's the behavior supposed to be? And then, I can define that. And then, okay, I can leverage the AI because, you know, AI is really good at knowing like the language and the, 1,500 different library packages that are available, right? That I could never memorize, but the AI knows about them all. Um, but then it needs to be the human that's like, okay, is this actually serving the intended purpose? And how can we verify that? Um, and so I've seen it be good at that. I've seen it be good with product folks and managers and coaches as a little bit of a brainstorming aid, right? It's almost like someone you can bounce ideas off of and all of that. And that can be good. Um, where I've seen it not be good is number one, on the technical side, groups that are relying too heavily on it. So I recently had a really interesting conversation with a fellow coach. The organization they were working with had a new like CIO person who had come in and was all gung ho AI, right? Blah blah blah. And we have this particular tool, and they went so far as they had a dashboard that was showing how much each developer was utilizing the AI tool, and they were really pushing hard. No, you're not utilizing it enough. Use it more. And so what happened was, yeah, there were more and bigger code changes happening because the AI can write a lot of code very quickly. Um, but people didn't really understand them. And then their product was down for a few days. And when they finally figured it all out, and it was changes that the AIs had made, that the people who were responsible for like making those changes and doing the commits didn't fully understand and hadn't fully vetted, right? And in part because they were feeling pressure to like use the AI and trust the code the AI was creating, and the AI was creating a lot of code. And something that is true for technical people, has been for a long time, is for almost everybody, it's actually easier to write code than to read it.
Yeah.
And so if you're leaning on the AI and it's writing, thousands of lines of code, nobody's going to read those thousands of lines of code to understand what they're doing. And, AIs are far from perfect. They hallucinate and they make mistakes. And in this case, literally, it led to like lots of hours of downtime for that company's product, right? They were over relying on it. Um, so I think it's interesting to watch it evolve. Like it's a tool, right? If we get good at using the tool, that's going to be really interesting. Um, but I also think right now it's like, oh, everybody's super excited about it and it's the cure for everything. And it's like, maybe not. Maybe not yet.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
not yet. um, yeah, so AI is still not there yet, but maybe 5, 10 years down the line, we might see a lot of improvement because it's changing fast. But yes, right now it's not totally reliable. You need to at least vet things. And as you said, it's difficult for a software engineer to read stuff, the code. And that's why people take a lot of time to review the codes. They quickly write the code, but they take time to review the code. So, um, and this is something, a lessons learned for everyone, that uh, don't focus on quantity, producing a lot of code or a lot of projects done in a less amount of time, but then focus on value and quality instead of doing this, where you might fall under that technical debt thing and have to rework and spend a lot of time there. Instead of that, focus on producing better quality code or your work uh, in the first go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Chris, for sharing your time and your breathtakingly brief wisdom with us today. And to our listeners, if you found valuable insights from today's conversation, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And I'll share all the LinkedIn posts and Chris' book and all the links below in the description section below. Feel free to reach out to Chris on LinkedIn. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Till then, bye bye.